Hi everyone, welcome to tutorial 4 of our 8-part tutorial series on Wellness Recovery Action Planning, also known as WRAP. My name is Michael Norton. I'm an advanced level WRAP facilitator. I am also one of the National Engagement and Recovery Leads with the Office of Mental Health Engagement and Recovery. I am your facilitator today, and today what we're going to talk about is triggers and action plan for those triggers. So firstly, what are triggers? Why do we care about triggers? And how, if a trigger comes about, how can we prevent it or minimize the damage it does? So if we look at the curriculum of WRAP, they suggest that triggers are external events or circumstances that may make you feel very uncomfortable. These are normal reactions to life events, but you don't respond to them. But if you don't respond to them, they may actually make you feel worse. So in the actual curriculum of Wellness Recovery Action Planning, it asks you to make a list of all the things that trigger you and make you feel worse. And remember, triggers, as stated in slide 1, is our external events. So they're everything that happens outside of you that makes you feel bad. So that can be the death of a loved one. It could be an anniversary. It could be a particular date. It could be even right now, it could be the coronavirus. All these kind of things may trigger you to feeling very bad inside. And it's important to notice that, so that not only do you notice that you feel bad because of that particular reason, but you also can figure out how you can prevent that from happening or reduce the effect it may have, as we'll go into a little later on. So examples of triggers are problems at work, difficult relationships with co-workers, benefits being questioned or denied, doing work that is hard for you, anniversaries of loss or trauma, traumatic news. And it's very important when we look at these triggers that you identify that some of these things, you can prevent and you can stop. Others, like an anniversary of a loss or a trauma, these are things that come around every year, and you can't necessarily prevent them from happening. So in your action plan for triggers, you're actually trying to reduce the effect these anniversaries or these dates have on your own health. So other examples are being very overtired, physical illness, work stress, sexual harassment, family friction, aggressive sounding noises, financial problems, and feeling left out. Other examples include reminders of abandonment, intimacy, excessive stress, guilt, criticism, put downs, spending too much time alone, being teased. So they are examples of triggers that can occur. For me in my own life, a trigger for me, one of the biggest triggers for me, and that still really resonates with me a lot, is actually going into a church and seeing a priest. They seem like kind of like, why are you triggered by them? They sound stupid, but the thing is, they trigger my voices. They trigger that kind of really bad feeling inside of me, because when I was unwell, a lot of my voices wanted me to be priests, wanted me to become a priest and to do all these things that I didn't want to do myself, but my voices were very religious in nature at that time. So every time I walk into a church, every time I see a priest in a church, not necessarily outside of a church, but in a church, I start getting these really bad feelings inside of me, this anxious feeling, this butterflies in my stomach, this kind of screaming in my head, kind of saying, get out, we cannot deal with this kind of stuff. And that's one example of how a trigger can really affect me. But I'm a Catholic, and you can't really prevent going to a church or prevent seeing a priest or whatever. That's going to happen now and again. So it's kind of like, in my action plan, it's kind of taking measures to reduce that down, as we're going to discuss later on, and reduce that kind of stress or that kind of real feeling inside of me that really feels bad. And a lot of that comes with exposure. For me, it's all about exposure, and gradual exposure. Kind of getting used to it again. Kind of realizing that, you know what, even though I'm feeling this way, they're just feelings, and that if I attend for a short period of time, I still get some great relief out of that. So that's kind of my action plan for that. The other one is the example I've used a couple of times now in this tutorial series, and that is the actual listening to a particular song. You probably remember from tutorial, I'd say at this stage it's tutorial 2, that I mentioned that there's a certain song that if I listen to it, it brings me back to a really bad place. So basically then my action plan for that would be the kind of, I'm never going to be able to stop hearing that song, but for as much as possible, I reduce the amount of exposure I have to that song. And that includes not having it on my playlist on Spotify or on Apple Music or whatever. These are kind of small little things that I do to prevent me from hearing that song. But sometimes I am going to hear that song. So I need to realize, okay, so when I hear that song, how do I reduce the damage it does? So maybe it's just skipping the song. Maybe it's turning the radio station to a different radio station. All these kind of things help. So in the curriculum, it states that an action plan, a trigger action plan, is that you develop a plan that you feel will keep you from feeling worse if a triggering event occurs. So it keeps you from feeling bad when a trigger happens. An example for any kind of trigger, if any of my triggers come up, I make sure I do everything on my daily maintenance list. If work related, talk to my vocational counselor, focus on tasks that are easy for me to do well. So what I find is really important here is that for these sections of the RAP, you're kind of going back on earlier sessions to make sure you stay well. So you do the things that keep you well on a daily basis. You make sure you always have that in your action plan for triggers and as we go up along before crisis as well. It's also, it probably will mention on the next slide, but I'll mention it here anyway. It's also about actually using your wellness toolbox and actually taking up your wellness toolbox and using a part of it to help yourself as well. So it's always important that in your action plan for triggers and for tomorrow's topic, which is early warning signs, and for Thursday's topic, which is when things are breaking down, in your action plans for all them, you always revert back to your daily maintenance list, the things you need to do every day to keep yourself well, and the wellness toolbox, the actual tools you use to actually make you feel well or make you feel better when any of these things happen. So that's just a little tip around the action plans. You add in other stuff as well that is specific to the specific trigger, but in general, you add in looking back on your daily maintenance list, and you add in using your wellness toolbox for those 3 sections. Other examples from the curriculum include getting one thing done that I know I can do well, doing a reality check, talk to a support person, write in my journal, get some vigorous exercise. So for some people, I know for myself, journaling is really handy to write in the way I'm feeling. Sometimes if it's too embarrassing to share with others, it's just easier to write it in. And then for others, then they find that actually doing some very vigorous exercise actually relieves those feelings that are inside that are made from that trigger. But it's up to each individual person as well. Others within the triggers action plan, another part of the sample plan is peer counsel with a friend, playing my guitar for an hour, doing some deep breathing and or relaxation exercises. And that would include the kind of stuff like mindfulness, kind of grounding yourself in the present moment, not letting your thoughts kind of run away with you, that kind of stuff. That is the basics of the triggers and the trigger action plan. It's really simple once you actually get actually doing it. So I suppose last day I asked you to kind of think about what kind of things you would put into your wellness toolbox, but also what kind of things you put into your daily maintenance plan. If between now and tomorrow's session, if you want to just think about what are actually the things that make me feel bad, that come from the outside. They are external in your environment that cause you to feel bad. And then when you identified that, think about what are the actual things you would put into an action plan to support you, to make sure that that trigger does not escalate into other parts, does not escalate into unwellness. So they're the kind of things you're talking about. So that's really it with triggers and the action plan. In newer editions of the program, of the RAP program, they're called stressors. But just so if you ever do attend the RAP program and they say stressors, stressors is the new word for triggers. So that's it for triggers and action plan for today. Tomorrow's topic is going to be on early warning signs. And these are really important because these are linked to triggers. So we will find out more information about that tomorrow. I'd like to thank you for joining me and just kind of think about your triggers. What are your triggers? And what kind of action plan would you put in place for a specific trigger if it ever came up? So thank you once again. Have a lovely and safe day, and we will talk to you all hopefully bright and early tomorrow. Thank you.